Hello and welcome back. I'm Dracoya from Dracoya.com, and today I want to teach you guys about wet blending. But before we get into it, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. On this particular card here, we'll say, I am going to show you wet blending on the back area, and then I'm going to show you a real-world application using the bubbles on the top. Right here we have phthalo blue, the green shade, violet, magenta, and then to warm it up, I'm going to add white and cold yellow. I chose these colors specifically because I thought they were kind of spacey, and I know that this particular character is psychic in nature, for those of you that know. And on the back, I've already given an example of what we aim to achieve. Now, wet blending is one of my favorite techniques. It's the first technique that I learned when I started painting, and it's because it's just so crucial to so many other things that you're going to want to paint. So I'm going to show you a few different ways to go about it. The first one here is I'm going to do something called color blocking. Now, I mixed my blue with a little bit of my white. I just really wanted to lighten up that consistency a little bit so it's a little easier for us to see on what I'm painting. And right next to it, I am going to do a box of magenta. It's a little bit purple because I didn't clean my brush off, but it's no big deal. This is acrylic, so we can just paint over that. I did leave a bunch of space between the blue and the magenta. Now, Dracoya, why would you do that? I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot of techniques where when you're color blocking, sometimes you're going to want those colors side by side. Other times, you want that space in between so that you have some space to blend those two pieces together. Right above that, I'm going to do the same thing with two more blocks, but this time I'm not going to leave the space in between. Either way, this technique works, and I will show you in both ways. For those of you that saw my previous video where I was painting dark skin tones, you'll notice that this technique is exactly what I did on that video, just in a smaller scale with smaller area. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for us to do it in a bigger format. Now, wet blending, you want your paints to be wet when you do this. I showed you color blocking so you can see it was dry a little bit before I began. I'm going to take my blue that I lightened up, and I am going to use tiny brush strokes to start painting towards that magenta color. And now I'm going to take the magenta and I'm going to start painting it as well. Now, I'm painting it back towards the blue at first so that you guys can see this isn't really what you want to do. You want everything to go directional in one direction. If you go towards the blue and then you take that blue and go towards the magenta and you're just keep going towards each other, all you're going to do is push that paint back and forth without really mixing it properly. So here's what we want to do. We want to go back and we want to feather it in one direction. As it is wet, it is going to slowly blend and transition between those two colors. Then I'm going to go use the magenta, and again, same direction, go down towards that magenta color. If you find that when you blend these two things, you're not getting enough of that color, for example, right here you can see that my magenta really looks more purple. Not a big deal, guys. It's acrylic paint. We'll just paint over it, and see, now we have a little bit more of that magenta coming through. And then I'm gonna go back to use the blue, go down just a little bit, and all we are doing is smoothing out that transition. There's a lot of different ways that you can use this particular technique. I really like seeing it in non-metallic metal because it gives it a smooth finish. Other people would use it for skin. I think it also works really well when you're trying to create shiny textures like silk. If you'd like to see some examples of that, comment down below, give me a thumbs up, and I will be happy to show off some non-metallic metal next time. All right, now doing the same thing with the color blocks that are above it side by side. I'm gonna take my blue and work my way down using my brush strokes in the same direction. This obviously had some time to dry, so at first you are going to see that stark transition between one color and the other. The great thing about acrylic paint is you can paint over it. So we're just going to work our way going back and forth just like we did before. And because I didn't have as much room between these two colors when I decided to color block, the transition itself is going to need to be much smaller in order to get the same effect. With wet blending, the real goal is to smooth out that transition between one color and the next. Don't be afraid when you're trying this out if it doesn't work at first. It can take a few times to get used to it. And it really is a back and forth, much like most things. Just trust in the process. I will say that using Kimera paints found on Dracoya.com makes wet blending a lot easier. They don't dry as quickly. They almost act like if oils and acrylics had a baby. That would be Kimera paints. They're very pigment dense, just like an oil, but they are acrylics. They still dry pretty quickly, just maybe not as quickly as some of the others. All of these blends are a little bit dark, so now to show you guys, you can do it in a transition to a light tone as well. I'm gonna mix my magenta with my universal highlight, the cold yellow, and a little bit of white, just to increase the vibrancy of what I'm doing. And now I'm going to start putting it next to my magenta. So we're gonna see this really cool transition from orange to magenta. Now, if you guys stay tuned, I will show you how you can do this in a real world application and how it's gonna look so cool and three-dimensional. Same thing, we're just gonna go back and forth between that magenta and that orange color until the transition is the way we really want. That could be as smooth or as rugged as you see fit. Just depends on the project. All right, chat, now we're getting somewhere. I really like that transition with the orange to the magenta and then to my blue. In the corner, you're gonna see the amazing art skills that I have. And it's a good example of what we're gonna do to these bubbles. So the first step is we wanna take our dark violet and we are going to outline the bubble itself. This is something that you're gonna wanna do on any spherical shape. Again, if you wanna comment down below, I can absolutely show you guys how to have this technique on something that has some other shapes. But for today, we're gonna stick with the sphere. So we wanna outline the sphere all the way around. We wanna make sure that violet shows everywhere because that is going to be the difference on how we can see that it is three-dimensional. Without the shadows, the highlights do not pop the way we're gonna want them to. The great part about zenithal priming is it shows you already where your highlights and your shadows are going to be. That's why when you zenithal prime, it's very important to figure out where you want your light source to come from and stick with that. And more on that in another video. Step 2, we're going to take that light blue that we had created earlier, mixing the phthalo blue green shade and some white, and we are going to add our next layer. I'm gonna take my brush and just go back and forth, and I wanna make sure that it is rounded and not just a straight line across. You see how I'm doing that? It's almost like a U shape. Next, I'm going to take my magenta and I'm gonna add over the next layer. Just like before, when I am adding this next layer, I'm gonna take my brush and just go back and forth, this time kind of side to side, to make sure that I blend each of these layers correctly. You'll notice that on the top it's starting to pool a little bit. It's not a big deal. Sometimes that can happen depending on the primer that you use or if you are printing something that's resin. All I'm gonna do is try to take something and add it on top, let it dry a little bit. The next layer will go right on. So to transition between my magenta and my blue, I took my blue and I'm again just going back and forth to smooth out that wet blending and the transition. Now that the transition from the blue and the violet is the way I want, to add a little bit of shine, you'll see that light blue streak in my little example in the corner. I'm gonna take some white and that same blue just to lighten it up a little bit, and I'm gonna add a nice little highlight just on one side of my blue. This is not going to encompass all of the blue that I laid down. It's only going to be that one area. And that's gonna give the illusion of a shine and almost a wetness. When you paint eyes, you're going to use the exact same technique, something of which I can show you guys in another video if you're interested. Now we're gonna go back to the magenta and we're gonna create another circle right on top where my highest highlight is going to be. Notice how I'm not coloring it in all the way just yet. The reason for that is I wanna take that nice orange color that I used in the very last bit of our wet blending, and I wanna just put it right on top to make my sphere pop. It's gonna look really cool, guys, trust me. I'm gonna make sure I soften those transitions between the blue and the magenta. Yeah, it is gonna make it to where there's a small darker line during that transition. That's totally okay. I think it's gonna look pretty cool. Now I'm taking that orangey color that we created earlier. Again, that was just magenta with a little bit of cold yellow and white on top. And it's gonna make this really cool, like orangey, coral, pink color. I think it would give it a really nice transition from that magenta, just to lighten it up a smidgen. We still wanna make sure our transition between each layer is nice and smooth. Last step here is we're gonna add a vibrant pop of color to the top. I'm gonna mix a little bit more of the yellow and white to that orangey coral color that we had created. I want it to be really light. I'm not going to add that color to everything. Again, look at the Dracoya art original in the corner, and you'll see I just created this one stripe. If you want to know what shape it is, you almost want it to look like a comma or a music note that's bent. And we're going to make sure that we have that complementary light at the bottom. See, now that it's starting to finish up, it really looks three-dimensional, very spacey, very space-like. I know a few people who watch this video are gonna go, oh, Dracoya, that's amazing, but I could never do that. That is magic. It's sorcery with a paintbrush. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. In fact, we're gonna repeat the experiment because I'm a scientist. So we're gonna take the violet and we're gonna outline that piece to add that three-dimensionality to this. If we don't line it and we don't have that violet to bring the three-dimensionality, it's not going to look as protruding from the card itself. It's gonna look a little bit flat. So make sure you do not skip this step. Next, we're gonna add our light blue color for the next layer. I'm taking my brush and I'm going back and forth with the transition to make sure that the violet to blue is nice and smooth. The bigger the surface area, the easier this is. You'll notice that even with the blue, I am going up quite high to create that U-like shape. If you wanted to, you could create a very small, thin layer right at the top. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna go about 70 or 80% of the way of the sphere, leaving the majority of it at the top for my magenta. Next, adding the magenta on top and smoothing out the transitions between the blue and the magenta. Even though it's called wet blending, sometimes we are gonna have to step away and let things dry just so that we can really double check our work and see how well that transition from one step to the next looks. Also, if you feel like you're getting to a point of wet blending where it's not blending and it's just pushing the paint back and forth, this is a very common thing. Take a step back, take a break, grab a drink of water, come back. It doesn't need that long to rest, but you would be absolutely surprised at what happens when you just let it rest for a few minutes between adding the layers. And then you won't be pushing paint around your model and you won't undo by accident your amazing work. I'm gonna take that orangey color and I'm gonna put it at the top. And again, just kind of creating that bent music note or the comma shape. I'm gonna add a little bit more of the highlight to the card itself, and that's going to create a shine to it. If you guys like this video, let me know. Comment down below, give me a thumbs up. If there's something else that you'd like to see or have me explain it a different way, I am more than happy to do that. Once again, I am the US distributor for all things Kimera in the USA, and you can find these paints on Dracoya.com. Remember to comment, like, subscribe, shop Dracoya.com, and guys, paint around and find out.